If you are a yoga teacher that teaches dynamic yoga asana classes, it is likely that you have put a few of these into your sequence. And what I mean by these is balancing poses, yeah? And you've probably seen a lot of your students struggle with these balancing poses. And today I want to show you a very easy thing that you can immediately integrate into your classes to help your students improve their capacity for balance. Now, there are many reasons why someone might struggle with balance, and I'm only going to be addressing this one component today. However, it is so easy to make this tiny change in your sequence as a teacher to support your students in improving their balance. Now, what I'm going to show you might be something that you currently already teach, and that's great. Here is a reminder. But for most yoga teachers, I have noticed this is not something that we generally do. We don't equate what I'm about to show you to being helpful for getting our students to improve their balance. But I assure you this works. I have done it with myself. I have done it with so many other students, and it really does make a massive difference. So I'm going to get right into it with you. So many poses that we do where we are in, let's say, a separate leg position, whether it's more of like a lunge position like this, whether we're open facing like this, whether that front leg is straight like this. So many of these types of poses, we rest the weight of the torso down on either the arm on the leg or maybe the hand on the floor. Now, what happens when we do that is there is a destabilization within the center point of the body, because the legs in the lower body and then up into here as well, it no longer has to do what is required to hold the body up, because we've now started resting onto the arm. So when you think about a balance, it really truly is a balance here. So it makes sense for us to then begin to approach some of these poses that I just showed you with a hands-free variation. And what I mean by hands-free, I mean not utilizing the hands either on the leg itself, on the ground, or on any other part of the body to hold the torso up. And what this does is it creates a natural stability within the trunk of the body, the core, like the core of an apple, and within this center point, this balance point, this center point of gravity. Now, the other really great thing about taking these hands-free variations and giving your students these variations in practice is that it helps them to transition. So say you're in something like this, the hand is down, and you're coming into a twist. All of a sudden, your students have to regain their stability through the lower half of the body to be able to then come forward and get that. Whereas, if we took the hand off of the ground and we were here from the very beginning, that transition is going to be so much more accessible in the body and so much more achievable because the stability has already been established. Now, you might have picked up on just that one little thing when I was doing this demonstration, which is the other point of having the hand down and letting the torso be taken, the weight of the torso be taken. The other point I want you to be aware of is that we have a tendency to then overextend in the body. And I'm exaggerating this for sure, but this overextension in the body would not be possible if I took my hand off the ground. Why? Because I'm utilizing the fact that the weight of my torso is being held up, not by my lower body, not by this center point of gravity, and not even by my trunk, but it's being held up by my extremities, my arms. So when we take that off, we have to come into stability, which means we are no longer as inclined to overextend and move into often hypermobility. So when we give our students the opportunity to go hands-free, which again, we might not think this is helpful for balance, but it really truly is. When we give them the opportunity to go hands-free and try an asana without resting the weight of the torso down into the arm, into the leg, into the ground, we actually give them the opportunity to improve their balancing capacity. So I want to show you a few poses where you can begin to incorporate this into your sequencing. And again, it is so incredibly simple. There's no extra stuff that you will have to really learn. All you're doing is encouraging your students to go hands-free. So for something like this, for example, instead of resting and making, you can make contact skin on skin, but it's not flesh on flesh, bone on bone, the weight of the torso, being held up by the leg. No, what it is a light touch or completely off altogether. Now, when we do this type of thing, we are helping our students prepare for a balance that is quite similar in nature, right? So what we're looking to do is give them those tools to be able to stabilize through the body and therefore lead into a balance further down the track, whether that's right during that class and that sequence, or whether that's later on another time. This is a cumulative thing, and the more that your students approach these types of poses in this way, hands-free, the more they're going to be building up their stability for balancing poses. So again, it can be a hover, and then again, whatever else you're instructing your students to do with this other arm. The same thing goes when the hand comes down. If the body is coming down on the inside, don't just rest and drop. Yes, and again, we have this tendency to overextend in the body. This is like, oh, it's so pretty. But as soon as we lift that off the ground, we're going to get lots of strain into this area, lots of over rotation, hypermobility, hyperflexibility, too much range of motion, not very stabilizing for the joints. So if you come into something like this, again, instead of resting down on the ground, there's a lift. Now, there's a really important point there that I think is going to be helpful for you as a teacher to just observe and notice within your students. Now, they might be down here in something like this. Then you say, take your hand off the ground. So if they're just going here and taking their hand off, again, this can exacerbate some hypermobility in this area. So what I like to say is, we're going to be taking the hand off of the ground, and I want you to do so because of the fact that you are trying to touch the ceiling. So the raising up and the lifting up of the torso is what gets the hand off the ground, not the shortening of the bottom arm, the pulling the shoulder and retracting it in. No, it's the contrast of maybe a top arm in that instance reaching up, which creates the space to have either elbow not on the thigh or hand not on the floor. Now, another great example, which I showed before, is this type of twist. Regardless of what this top arm is doing, I like to have my hand like this. So instead of leaning the weight down and resting, and then using that to over twist and having this quite inactive here. I mean, yeah, we can have all these cues like pull the front hip back, press the back hip forward. Those are all great, but you know what fixes it? Just take the hand off of the ground. It's a very simple fix. Not only is it very simple, sensible, natural, harmonious in the body, it's going to help your students with their balance in the long run. So again, with something like this, it is the same circumstance, not pressing, using that to push and twist the body. Could I hold that position when I take my elbow off? No, I can't. Why? Because I'm forcing. When we use force, we create deactivation and destabilization in the body. So instead, we go hands-free. Elbow hovers, and then from here it would be so much easier to take a balance as opposed to pressing the elbow on the thigh, destabilizing the body, and then trying to fit a balance on top of that. Now, the final thing that I want to show you here as an example of going hands-free is in something like a pyramid. And this really starts from the very beginning of the pose. The stability starts from the beginning. Now, if we just get our students to come all the way down and bring the hands on the floor and really let the length of the torso and the weight of the torso be what creates the stretch in the back of that front leg, again, we're actually creating a lot of instability within the hip region. So instead, we want to pull away from that, and you can instigate that type of pulling away by doing these types of instructions from the very beginning. So you're going to want to split the mat with the feet. Back foot presses back, front foot presses forward. For me, I have to consciously make sure that I do not hyperextend my front leg. Yeah, but the pressing of the feet in opposite directions activates this back glute to reciprocally release this front hip, activates this front hip to reciprocally release this back glute and hamstring. Then so long as that splitting of the mat can be maintained and there's that natural activation of the front leg, then the body is only going so far. This is really only as far as I can go while still splitting the mat with the feet. Now I'm quite flexible, so if I let go of that, I can totally come down. But I've lost the stability that's going to be required for my balance. Now, even if I can balance in that place of flexibility, overstretching this back of the leg here, not so good in the long run for the joints. So we split the mat with the feet, we maintain that as much as possible. The activation of the front of the leg via splitting the mat reciprocally releases the back of the leg. Then from here, the student is so much more ready to be able to transfer the weight and take that back leg and move wherever it is that they need to move. So try going hands-free in your sequences, giving your students the opportunity to really feel where the stability has to come into play. It might be a little bit more challenging for them for sure, but if you can communicate to them that this stabilization is going to help them in their balance, and it's going to help their general joint health and general well-being because they're utilizing the strength as opposed to just dipping into the flexibility. If you can communicate that to them, they will start to see the benefit of making this change. So try going hands-free for a lot of these poses in your next sequence and see how it goes. If you really like this content, make sure that you comment and let me know, and subscribe for more.